Okay, in this chapter we're going to cover how to skateboard, the very basics of skateboarding. That's riding, starting, stopping, and turning.
So let's review some of those moves. That's just plain old riding. This is turning by carving. This is turning by doing kick turns. This is starting off by pushing. This is starting off by doing tic-tacs. This is stopping by doing a tail slide. And this last move is stopping by doing a power slide. This one we're actually not going to teach because it's a little bit harder for beginners to do.
You know whether you're regular foot or goofy foot, it's time to take it to the grass. This will help you learn about balance and more control on your skateboard. Put your front foot at a 45-degree angle over your front truck and your back foot at a 90-degree angle over your tail. You can wobble back and forth, keeping your knees bent so that you feel nice and stable. Also, you can lean back a little bit and start feeling control and go back to your tail.
Another thing that you can do once you start to feel comfortable with that is that you can start to do little kick turns. And to do a kick turn, you lean your weight back and then kick the front side to side. And you can start out really small like this, and then once you get more comfortable and you're feeling confident with your balance point, you can start to turn it a lot farther.
Yeah, and when you're doing kick turns on the grass, it's really good to remember to use your upper body too to help your lower body move. It sounds kind of funny, but it really makes sense to have your whole body move together. Kind of sweep and over-exaggerate your upper body in the direction you want to go. It'll just make the movement so much easier. Get your whole body into it. It's one fluid motion. Yeah, look at Eric go. Yoo-hoo!
So because your foot position is so incredibly important, let's review, shall we? Your feet should always be like this. You can see the front foot is at about a 45-degree angle right over the front bolts. Don't have it back here behind the bolts. Okay, you can have a little bit of control that way, but it's best to have them over the bolts. Don't have it way out front, in front of the bolts either. And your back foot has to be at a 90-degree angle over the tail, not right here over your rear bolts, not a weird angle like this. Your front foot shouldn't be all crooked like that. Okay, your front foot should always be over the bolts at a 45-degree angle or more. You could even do a 90-degree angle in the front, and the rear should always be completely on the tail at 90 degrees. Now if you're regular footed, it's the same thing. You got to make sure that your front foot is at about a 45-degree angle or more. So that would be, if you're regular footed, that would be your left foot, and make sure your rear foot is at a 90-degree angle over the tail. Now again, this just applies to riding the board, okay? If you're going to do certain tricks and things like that, then your foot position might be different. But when it comes to just riding down the street, just cruising through the skate park, this is the position that your feet should be in at all times.
Now that you know the basics of keeping your balance on the board, one of the best ways to learn how to actually ride is to find a really slow, gradual hill. And just stand on the board with your standard foot position and start to go down the hill. Like so.
Now as you can see, I didn't even have to push. I just put my feet on the board and let gravity start to take me down the hill. And then as you go faster and faster, you just start to slowly lean and turn, and as you come back up the hill, of course, you'll start to slow down. And you just do that over and over a few times. Whenever you start to go too fast and it's freaking you out a little bit, just start to turn back up the hill again.
Obviously that only shows you how to turn in the left-hand direction, so you also, after a couple times of repeating that, want to try it in the right-hand direction. Keep your knees bent, stay low with your arms out, and look to where you want to go. The more you look, that's where you're going to go.
So again, this is just a really, really great technique to learn how to ride because you don't have to push. All you do is lean the board and turn up the hill to slow back down. And you can pick up as much speed as you want by continuing straight down the hill. You know, and then once you start to go too fast, you just turn back up. And keep doing it down one side of the hill, so you keep turning to the right, and then you start to turn to the left. And keep doing it that way.
Okay, so now you know how to ride and how to turn. Now you need to actually know how to get moving and how to stop. The most common way to start moving is by pushing. And by pushing, what you do is you put your lead foot right over the front truck bolts. And for when you start out, you're actually keeping your foot straight. You don't have it turned the way you do when you're riding. And you just keep your foot next to the board and give it a gentle push.
Once you get moving, then you want to turn your front foot at about a 45-degree angle like you normally would, maybe even a little bit more, and then get on your board with your back foot on your tail. having your back foot on the tail will help you if you want to move your board around. Also too, it's really important when you are pushing that you don't have your pushing foot too far away from your skateboard. Otherwise you're going to be like out there, you're going to be all over the place, and you're going to fall because you don't have any stability. The closer your foot is to your skateboard and the more that you're just one unit, it'll be a nice fluid ride, and then you get on and go.
Now the most common way to start moving on the board is by pushing, but another way that you could start to move is a move called a tic-tac. Now you notice that if you're just standing on your board with a normal foot position and you start to kind of just rock your weight back and forth, well, you start moving. By tic-tacking, what you do is you lean your weight onto the tail and do small little kick turns back and forth. And by shifting your rear foot's weight forward, you start to build up momentum, like this. And you can see that Holly is starting out and she's not putting her feet down, she's not pushing, she's keeping her feet on the board the whole time. And yet she's building up a lot of speed and a lot of momentum just by doing tic-tacs. So it's another great way to move on the board.
There's lots of different ways to stop when you're on your skateboard moving. A really great way is simply to do a tail slide. As you're moving, lean back on your tail and just slide till you stop. There you go.
Now obviously our students were not gaining enough speed to be able to do tail slides yet, and that's okay, you know, that's cool. Once they gain more experience and they're ready to start doing tail slides, just make sure that you keep your weight really centered over that tail when you're dropping down, because if you don't, the board is just going to shoot out from underneath you. So that's the key to doing a tail slide, is keeping your balance really centered as you're sliding.
Now another way that you can stop on a skateboard is by doing something called a toe slide. I've actually never done one, but Holly does them all the time. You simply are riding along and you take your rear foot and drag your toe along. And that helps slow down your momentum and make you stop. And I screwed that up, so let's do it one more time.
Now pay really close attention to the position of Holly's legs as she's doing the toe slide. You notice that her weight is staying very centered over the board. That's really important. It's really essential to these kind of moves. Make sure your weight stays centered.
The very first move that you should learn when skating in a skate park doesn't even involve a skateboard. It's called a knee slide. And the reason that you want to learn knee slides and practice them is because it really sort of goes against your natural instinct, but it helps you to not be hurt.
Knee sliding is a trick in and of itself, and it's really good to learn how to do it, because whether you tuck and roll and keep your limbs in, or you learn how to knee slide, it keeps you from getting hurt while you're skating at a skateboard park. So be careful, be aware, and practice your knee slides.
As I mentioned, cracking your knees into the ground really kind of goes against your natural instincts, so that's why it's really good to practice knee slides. You don't tend to use them on small transitions and small skate parks, but if you become accustomed to it and you train your body to realize that you can drop to your knees, slide out, and you'll be safe, then when you do skate larger bowls and ramps and transitions, you'll be able to do knee slides without even thinking about it and keep yourself safe when you wipe out.
Okay, the very first move that you should learn when learning to skate transitions is called a fakie. Fakies are where you simply ride straight up and come straight back down. And as you can see, you bend your knees kind of right in the transition and straighten out when you're coming up the transition. And the same applies when you're coming back down. Her legs are straight and her legs are bent as she comes back into the transition again, because you're sort of pumping up that transition. Now, we'll try it with the students, and I almost guarantee you that they're going to fall, because everybody does the first time. It takes a long time to get that timing right and keeping your balance point when you're doing fakies.
Okay, after you learn how to do fakies, which is pumping up and back the same way, you're going to want to learn how to do a kick turn on a transition, which is the absolute basic of every other trick you're going to do in a mini ramp or bowl or vert ramp. So a kick turn is a 180 basically, where you go up one way and you pivot your skateboard 180 degrees and come back the other way. It's important to learn how to do on backside and front side. There's a backside kick turn and a front side kick turn.
Whoa, back it up just a minute. Let's give you a better explanation of what front side and backside means. Okay, freeze it. Now, front side and backside are terms that originated in surfing, so let's pretend that the transition of the mini ramp that I'm on is actually a wave, and the top of the ramp is the top of the wave. Now if you turn with your heels and your back towards the top of the wave, that is called a backside turn. If you're turning with your toes and your chest towards the top of the wave, that is called a frontside turn.
See how he really lifts up his front wheels, his front foot, he lifts up and kicks out with his back foot a little bit as he's doing the pivot 180. You also want to remember to use your shoulders and look to where you're going, because wherever you're looking is where you're going to go.
The next thing you're going to want to learn is how to pump a transition. Now pumping is kind of difficult. In fact, we're not even going to have our students try it. But the way that you pump is that every time you get in the actual curve of the transition, you're bending your knees, like you can see Holly doing behind me, right? She's bending her knees when she gets into the turn of the transition, and as she comes up the transition, she straightens out her legs.
How you pump it is by using your body weight, your momentum, and it helps you keep your speed and helps you keep moving while you're skateboarding. Otherwise, you'll start off going high and go lower and lower and lower. So you have to pump in order to keep your speed and your momentum when you're riding transition.
Pumping a transition, whether it's a ramp or a pool on a skateboard, it's kind of a lot like riding on a swing set. You know, the way that you shift your weight and you throw your legs up and then you pull them back down. It's the exact same kind of concept. You're throwing your weight up the transition and then pulling it back down as you come back down the transition. And that shift of your weight is what allows you to keep your momentum going, just like on a swing set.
Pumping is something that does take a lot of practice, but this is how you keep your momentum going whenever you're skating pools or bowls or ramps.
Now once you've learned how to pump a transition, you can learn how to carve a transition. And carving is basically exactly the same concept, but now you're doing it horizontally instead of vertically. Now if you watch very closely, you'll see that every single time Holly and I hit one of the corners, we're compressing our knees down, and every time we hit one of the face walls, we're straightening out our legs. So it's the exact same idea. We're pumping our weight through the corners and straightening out on all the face walls. And by doing that, again, you can keep your momentum going and you keep your speed up. This is actually one of the most common things that I always get asked whenever I'm in a skate park by new skaters. You know, how do you carve? How do you carve the pool? That's all you got to do. Once you know how to pump, you'll know how to carve. It just takes a lot of practice.
So the next thing that we want to teach you is how to drop in to a mini ramp or any kind of transition. But before you're ready, and if you don't feel quite comfortable dropping on a transition, a great thing to learn is how to drop in on a flat bank. You can either roll down a flat bank like this, or you can put your skateboard out and drop in. So the first thing I'll do is just simply roll down a flat bank. What I want to do is keep my knees really bent and kind of keep my weight centered over the skateboard, which means because I'm going down a slope, I'm going to want to lean forward just a little bit. So after you've rolled down a flat bank, if you're not quite comfortable dropping in on coping, you can try dropping in on the flat bank. So you just put your tail where like the transition changes, bend your knees a lot, act like you're going to grab your nose and press super hard forward.
Okay, so the next thing that you want to try to learn is dropping in. Now, dropping in is something where you should definitely start as small as possible and work your way up. As Holly had explained, you can start on just an embankment, but then you eventually want to work up to going up bigger and bigger transitions. Dropping in is actually really easy, but it can be really scary. So the way that you drop in is the same, no matter how big the transition is. You simply put your board on the edge of the coping, put your front foot over the front bolts, and for me personally, I've had a much easier time when I kind of crouch down. I'm less scared for some reason when I do that. But you know, I'll admit there are things that are too tall for me to drop in on too at this point. So I'm still learning, just like everybody else. But on a 4-foot like this, it's really easy. You just put your front foot on there, put your weight to your front, and drop. And then you're in. And that's all you have to do to be able to drop in on transition.